everyone, and welcome to another edition of Dynamics Fortnite Fridays.
Where we cover everything Dynamics great and small. So, Bart, it is, if you're a Christian or most Christian denominations, it's Easter weekend. It's Good Friday today.
Yeah, because we finally are getting to the first Sunday after the first full moon after the spring equinox.
Yes. So,
Yeah.
a little bit of trivia there. So, it's trivia and jokes today. So,
Right. So
which is
what's the
kind of a
funny one you
segue.
got?
Okay, let's see what I got here. It's like, again, it's like until I get done with this deck, I'm going to use this until we get done. Okay.
All right.
How do you get a country girl's attention? This isn't a bad one. This isn't a bad one.
So it didn't go down in the gutter with this one?
No.
That's
Okay,
good.
these are every one of these is rated G. So
That's good. That's good.
yeah. So how do you get a country girl's attention? A tractor.
Oh, you attract her. All right.
That's a good one. Isn't that good? I like that one.
Yeah,
I'd say that's just like, as far as dad jokes go, it's like that's an A, but as regular jokes, that's a C minus. So that's pretty good for us.
right?
So okay. So what do you got?
Well, so I'm sort of in that same category, I think. So what do you call a mischievous Easter egg?
Dumb bunny? No. I don't know. Tell me.
A practical yokester.
Oh, I hope our content's a lot better than our jokes.
Always.
Good context. Jokes same as always. So, what do you got for me this week, Bart?
All right. Well, let's get rid of my reminders that we're doing a show and jump right in. So it's lots of content since it's been a month since we got together. So the first couple things are just reminder. Build is coming up in mid-May, and the BizApps launch event is end of the month. So if you haven't registered, please go do so. All right. We have introduced a few new capabilities into Copilot Studio agents. So one of those is deep reasoning. So you have the ability to flip on a feature to say, allow my Copilot to deep reason using sort of the OpenAI o1 model. And when you turn that on, it will automatically figure out when you're doing something complex enough, it ought to invoke that if you allow it to. Otherwise, it'll use one of the standard models so that it doesn't charge you the o1 rates that are much more expensive whenever it's doing things. But you can always tell it, if you want to put reason in a particular prompt or something that you're asking it to do, and it will then force it to use the o1 model if you want to. So that's pretty cool. Next thing is agent flows have been announced. So the ability to do declarative, deterministic kind of automations in the context of the rest of your agent just doing its thing is now finally here. To me, the main reason this exists is to get you out of having to license users for premium capabilities where something like Power Automate makes sense. Because if you use an agent flow to do it, it just consumes messages in the context of your Copilot Studio agent and doesn't have to require that the user to do anything in Power Automate and be licensed appropriately. So that to me is the big thing, but it will allow you to be completely deterministic within Copilot Studio's UI itself and not have to jump out into Power Automate in order to make those things happen. Last part of this one is autonomous agents. The ability to just have it wake up and do stuff is now generally available and supported. So nice updates there. Power Automate Desktop has had an update that's documented, and another one has come out that we don't have the details on yet, but this one that was back in March allows us to do test cases. So you've got some nice things you are able to do to run some test capabilities inside of Power Automate Desktop. New action for select SAP navigation item is out there, and the ability to use Azure Key Vault creds, not just CyberArk ones, are now part of the product. So if you are doing Power Automate Desktop automations, a couple of nice new features for you. Copilot Studio has had a significant rate decrease in terms of how many messages each of the things that it's doing will consume. So take a look at our documentation out here to see what the new models are, and it is a pretty significant decrease in terms of pricing there. So use them even more. A really nice update has come out for the Dataverse to Fabric capability that has all along been called Link to Fabric from the kind of Dataverse-centric view of the world, where you went into the Maker portal for Power Apps to flip the thing on. The thing that has really happened in this space from that perspective is the amount of time or lag between when the transaction happens in Dataverse and when it will show up in Fabric in the linked tables has been ratcheted down significantly. So we're down to, somewhere in that 30 seconds to maybe a minute or so realm of when the data will show up in the Fabric places for you to do reporting on. So much, much more fresh data showing up in Fabric for you if you need closer to those real-time updates. The other part of it, which is a little bit of a misnomer in the way I think about things, but it's up to the product people to decide how they're going to name stuff, is this concept of a mirrored Dataverse. And mirrored Dataverse is not the way I would have described it, because we're not doing the same thing as if you tried to mirror a SQL server or mirror a Cosmos DB in the way Fabric does things. When you do this, what it's allowing you to actually do is start a link to Fabric from within the Fabric workspace and connect it to Dataverse, and then it does the exact same thing as Link to Fabric did from within the Power Apps Maker portal. It's just made so that the people who are more analytics oriented and like to spend most of their day in the Fabric tooling can also link into the Dataverse environments that they have access to from there. So that's basically what it does. And that's probably enough of an overview for today. Copilot Studio got lots of things introduced in March, so I'm going to spend just a little bit of time going through a lot of these. So we already talked about them being generally available. We already talked about deep reasoning. We already talked about agent flows, so those go pretty fast. The generative orchestration had been in preview for a long time. It is now generally available as well, so that's a big deal because it's much, much richer in terms of what it can just figure out how to go do without having to describe as many things as the classic orchestration. Model context protocol we covered in the last show that we were there talking about, that it is a interesting new way to connect up to various data sources without going through our connector infrastructure. And if the MCP server has already been set up and you connect it through our connector infrastructure to your agent, then it just automatically picks up everything the MCP server can do, and it watches for changes in real time of whatever you add to that MCP server once you link to it. So it just picks up all those things natively. Tools and prompts, this has been announced in this blog post, but I have not seen it show up inside of the product yet. So what shows up here in this UI as tools in every UI that I have seen so far, I think it still says like catalog or something similar to that, that it is the collection of all these things, but doesn't show the UI that's shown there. Hopefully that shows up soon, or they update this documentation, one of the two. I have seen this ability to use open web search though. So it is a really nice new kind of on-off switch that you can turn on, along with whether you want to allow the agent to use its own internal training of whatever version is active at the moment that is doing the orchestration, to see if it can use its own knowledge. You can turn that on or off, and you can do this web search now that would look at the live internet and whatever is current right at the moment to be able to ping that to answer questions. So that's a nice new feature. And then this ability to find Microsoft built agents in Copilot Studio. So they don't actually list this in exactly the same way as it describes. It doesn't say built by Microsoft. It basically says like pre-built template or something like that, but it is called out in its own section in the create screen that makes it obvious that these are sort of the Microsoft pre-built ones that you can then instantiate and turn on and then customize if you would like to. So lots of cool stuff there. The private preview for GPT-4.5 instead of whatever is current, that I believe is GPT-4o right now in Copilot Studio, is out there if you have signed up for it, only in true preview environments. So that one only for certain people who have signed up is out, but it will get turned on, I'm guessing, sometime around that build time frame for just about anyone else to play with as the orchestration engine. And I even have some hints coming around that I'm trying to read tea leaves on that might say we're going to get even more than just these two as options for our orchestrator. So we'll see. But lots of great news in Copilot Studios world. Um, Knowledge in Copilot Studio. So everybody knows you need the ability to have retrieval augmented generation happen so that Copilot Studio's agent framework can look at files or data that's in the graph or data that's in Dataverse or data that's in Fabric or data in SQL servers or data in other services that we've got lots of different ways to connect up to let the agent go query all those knowledge sources, get the pile of data that comes back, figure out if any of that data answers the question that has been asked by the user, and give you that answer. So this is just a really nice way to think through how to do all of those things. I'll let you read as desired for that. Power Apps also had a pretty significant update in March. So AI-powered development, that's nothing particularly new in that. This ability to use that really functional, true agentic plan designer to build the infrastructure and maybe even the apps and the flows and everything else that are needed for your business use case, along with user stories and everything else, allows you to now make edits to at least parts of it. So the things that it's describing for the roles and what the roles entail for the job functions that you want this thing to actually be able to accomplish. You used to have to just look at it, and if it got it right, perfect. But if it didn't, you'd have to like update your prompt, and that was the only way to make it do more things. Well, if it got close, but you just want to tweak and change some of the wording and add a couple more bullet points, you can now just inline edit on that plan designer and just make changes before hitting the next step. And the next agent just looks at whatever changes you had made. So I think that will continue to evolve this plan designer to allow you to let it get you started and then make tweaks that it understands that you're tweaking and then saves that before the next agent kicks in as we go. Right now, it's the first step down that path. They've modernized the Create Apps page, the data workspace, which before was really cool for creating new tables, didn't allow you to put an existing table in and make any tweaks to that, but it now does. So that's a pretty big, nice update to data workspace. I also saw a really cool blog post out there that in that data workspace now, if you wanted to instantiate a brand new table and you had a SQL background, so you knew like if you were going to create a table in SQL, how you would generate the create table SQL, you can just paste that into the Copilot in the data workspace and it will instantiate a Dataverse table with all those same properties that you would just put into your SQL. So that's actually a pretty cool thing too. Enterprise grade governance with managed availability. That's been out there, but this is just a great reminder that it's there. I had no idea this existed, that there is this textual solution assessment. So we have the solution checker, this part of the platform that runs it through a bunch of tests, but this solution assessment is a text-based tool that you can go click on and answer some questions, and it will give you a bunch of hints and kind of grade you on whether you are ready to make a solution deployment go live through a different way of analyzing it. So another great tool to look at. And that the model-driven Copilot chat, so model-driven apps and the sidebar where Copilot gets extended, now supports multimedia content as well. If you're not familiar with PowerCat tools, I think we covered it on the last show. A great new set of tools. Well, it's been out for a little while. They just made a nice update to some of the PowerCat tools to give you a lot of cool new features for doing like code reviews and documenting your solutions and having risk assessments and all those kinds of things. And it builds on top of and actually kind of replaces the Dataverse Accelerator if you were using that. Some nice new capabilities in the smart paste capability in model-driven apps that we can now put images in and use handwritten content. We can have more types of files that it already understands. You can directly enter some data that it maybe missed just right in its toolbar. And the biggest thing is you've got this ability to control it a little more, that when you're looking at a model of an app form, there may be like two fields that you're like, smart paste should never touch these. I want to make a human always, choose the right value for those. And you can actually just go into the metadata of the field. It's not showing here, but if I hit the learn more, it actually went in and it allows you to edit the metadata of a field that says allow smart paste to work, or you can uncheck the box to say smart paste can never make updates to this particular field. So a pretty nice new enhancement there. Process map in Power Automate. So this is in preview. It only shows up in early environments right now, but this process map is a great new tool to help give you a much clearer view of where Power Automate has parent-child relationships, whether it's desktop to cloud flows or cloud flow to cloud flow or desktop to desktop flows, that when you've got some of those, this will actually show you the overarching, here's what triggered the orchestrator basically, and here's what the data did across all of the other things that are tied to it. So a really nice new way to give you a comprehensive view of what's going on with particular automation. If you use the Center of Excellence Starter Kit, the April release is out, so make sure to go download it and update your starter kit. Quite a few new bugs were fixed again. No new features, but bug fixes aplenty for things out there, so pay attention. Nice new article in the Copilot Studio documentation out on learn.com about governance best practices and security best practices, two things that almost everyone who is trying to go agentic in the Microsoft framework of various ways to build agents, to think about if you're doing some of that work in Copilot Studio, what these best practices are. And it's pretty well done, pretty comprehensive. I'm just going to let you click through all of those, but wanted to call it out as a great new resource out there on that topic. Copilot Studio Kit, fairly similar in concept to, the COE starter kit and the other kit that I just talked about, the Power Apps tools, I believe is what they were. Anyway, Copilot Studio Kit, also made by the PowerCat team. It is a specific set of tools for Copilot Studio that help you with the agentic capabilities. And it's got test capabilities. It's got KPIs that you might want to help document around conversations. Some tooling that if the documents are in SharePoint and you're not getting the fidelity of the quality of kind of the nuanced results that you were looking for in what the Copilot is doing, syncing those SharePoint information or those documents into the files repository of your agent, which lands in Dataverse, gives you a more precise chunked vector database to query from that often will help the precision of your results. So there's some nice capabilities built into this to help you synchronize that if you need to with some SharePoint repositories. The web chat playground, adaptive cards gallery. If you haven't figured out all the various ways you might want to either display data or ask for data with miniature adaptive card apps inside of your agent, there's a really nice gallery of capabilities, along with a couple of brand new features in the update of agent inventory to look at all of the agents across your tenant in one spot. That's coming to the Power Platform Admin Center, but not quite there yet. It is in this Copilot Studio Kit. And the agent review tool. So kind of like the Power Apps code review tool, there's now a way to look at the YAML definition of an agent in a pretty sophisticated way and have a toolkit that as you're going through your DevOps processes gives the reviewers a nice code review capability of those agents before they get deployed to production. So pretty great stuff. If you like to manage your encryption keys, and that's important for your organization, that you can now do that for Copilot Studio. So we've had that available in several different places in Power Platform, but it was only using Microsoft Managed Encryption Keys in Copilot Studio world until now. So if you want to do that, knock yourself out. If you want to have more sophisticated monitoring for the Power Automate capabilities than what is there in some of the things that I just talked about with the Power Automate sort of dashboards and parent-child monitoring of the various cloud flows and what can actually be done with application insights. We got a whole bunch of different things that are allowing you to monitor what goes on, but there is a way to connect Azure Data Explorer up to Power Automate's APIs and data structure so that you can run a bunch of SQL, maybe even Kusto queries against everything in Azure Data Explorer. So there's some pretty interesting capabilities in here that if you want more sophisticated ways to monitor certain things in the Power Automate space, check that out. Copilot Studio in our agentic framework now has some updated connectors for UiPath, such that if you have used UiPath to build automations, and those automations should help the agent either kick one off or get results from it to respond to a question that's being asked of the agent, that these UiPath connectors have been updated to work way more smoothly with things that are going on in Copilot Studio. So if you are using both of those platforms, it's nice that between the two of us, we have updated both what goes on the Copilot Studio side and what UiPath connector can do in the UiPath infrastructure to bring those two closer together. If you were wanting an assessment tool to kind of understand how AI ready your organization is to go big with agentic capabilities across the board, that this is a really nice assessment that gives you a lot of clues into how far along you are and your maturity level to be ready to go do things with a whole bunch of different kinds of tools in that agentic framework. So feel free to leverage that. The last sort of really big announcement for Copilot Studio is we just announced in preview a capability to do UI automation. We call it computer use. So this is going to allow your Copilot Studio built agent to do things like you could only do in Power Automate Desktop or a tool like UiPath or Automation Anywhere or some of those other RPA tools where all you have is a user interface to look at. You don't have an API to call. You're not looking at the database itself because you don't have the ability to make changes and things like that to the data of the database. So all you had was that UI in the past, and you had to use RPA in order to do automations and any other cool things. Well, new capability, Copilot Studio, you're now going to be able to let Copilot Studio look at a screen of a website or a desktop app or a client server app or kind of whatever is being used where you only have that UI, and just prompt it to say, I need you to input the details of this invoice. And it can look at the invoice and it can look at the screen, understand where the various fields are and what the buttons do, and actually just make it do that. Way easier and more flexible than RPA. So this is brand new. It should be really interesting to see how this behaves over time and how much it replaces the previous RPA capabilities that were pretty fragile and pretty expensive to run. And all of this will be hosted with hosted capabilities inside of Copilot Studio to actually host those machines that have the UIs on them that it needs to interact with. So if you're interested, fill out the form and join into that private preview. I'm sure it will be in public preview probably in that build time frame, given that we talked a little bit about what we're going to show at build in this blog post. So pay attention. If you're a Power Pages developer and you like to do some of that work in VS Code, we just introduced a bunch of new actions in the actions pane to allow you to come in here and do a whole bunch of different things right from the VS Code UI. So take advantage if you are one of those devs. Two other quick things that made it into the M365 Admin Portal Message Center that I thought were important is that with Copilot Studio, message packs, if you have turned those on, instead of just doing consumption-based billing for your agents, that's something you get to configure in the admin center. But if you've said, use my message packs, and here's how many messages I'm allocating for this agent to be able to use within a month, beginning April 30th, so end of the month, when you run out of those, of the capacity that you've allocated by more than 25%. So we're going to allow you to get up to 125% of your allocation because we know there are a few things that maybe you can't predict 100% with accuracy, and we're not going to have anything stop functionality until you've hit that 125%. But when you get to that, your agent is going to start responding to every query that comes through it with, I'm sorry, I'm not sure how to help with that. And so if you start to see that message, it's not necessarily something broken in our platform. It's just that you ran out of capacity and you need to find a way to allocate more to it, whichever way you decide to do that. So I thought that was pretty important to let people know. Last thing that I thought was super helpful to know for people that are doing a lot of this agentic work is that in the Copilot Studio realm, unless you were willing to authenticate as sort of a service account on behalf of the users, when users first logged on to an agent, if you needed them to authenticate to backend services, you had to make them authenticate that first time in to those services as themselves, and then they could use the agent from then on. But it was a little bit of a cumbersome experience, and we didn't really have that single sign-on experience that would have made that a seamless, smooth way to log on and do things. Well, that is going to happen about a month from now. So I thought that was another really big thing to make sure people were paying attention to, because you'll probably go and update quite a few of your Copilot agents to allow this at some point in your future. So that's everything in the Power Platform realm. I know that's a lot, and we've already gone through almost the 30 minutes that we usually allocate. It's going to go for a little long, as is pretty obvious. Another couple things that people, especially in the contact center space, need to be aware of is we are going to be renaming quite a bit of stuff around our contact center spot. So customer service workspace, if you have Dynamics 365 customer service, is what things have been called when you go into our sort of agent desktop model that is a web browser. Or the contact center workspace, if you did the non-D365 version of it, where you're just using CCAS as a breakaway service. And we're going to change both of those to just be named the Copilot Service Workspace. That way, you are not going to have a different one for which version. They're all just going to be called the Copilot Service Workspace. We also used to name the admin center for that. For the admins, either the Customer Service Admin Center or the Contact Center Admin Center, and that's now going to be the Copilot Service Admin Center. We also had this wonderful world of things that weren't descriptive enough, where agents were both underlying AI agents to do things that were agentic and trying to work on behalf of users. And in a contact center, the actual people who were taking the incoming requests that were contacts and managing them were always called agents in the past as well. Well, we are going to call those AI versions of things AI agents moving forward. And we're going to call people either customer service representatives or maybe just service representative or just representative, but there will always be at least the word representative in the human thing. So interesting updates to the way we are going to be naming things that I thought was important to call out. If you are using field service, I'm not even going to click into this. I'm just going to tell you that if you're a dispatch operator and you would like a AI agent to be able to click on any booking on your field service, the name of the thing just left me, the schedule board, that schedule board will now have this scheduling operations agent, so that when you click on it, it will actually give you, in just milliseconds usually, a lot of really good options that will optimize that particular booking for that person. So doing that one at a time with the scheduling operations agent should make a dispatcher's job considerably easier. We still have a place for RSO if you have purchased it for doing that in mass across your entire schedule board instead of trying to look at it sort of booking by booking. So they're both there for different reasons, but it's cool to see we're being agentic in this space. Another great blog post about if you have recurring work that you perform in your field service, whether that's maintenance, whether that's other things that you just go out and do on a periodic basis for a customer, that the agreements capability in the field service module is the best way to automate making sure that that recurring work just gets booked with the right resource on the right date and optimized into their schedule and all those kind of things. So take a read of this if you would like some guidance on making sure that that recurring work just automatically happens in the background. If you are a D365 contact center user, which I believe will also work with any of our CCAS, whether it's D365 or the standalone, that there is a desktop app specifically for the voice channel, that if for some reason something happens to the GUI that you usually work on that gives you all the call controls and things like that, that this desktop companion app allows something right to your local PC that allows you to sort of take control at least of the active call that you happen to be on if that other infrastructure goes down, and still manage call control, still make sure that you're connected and you don't just lose connectivity in that case. So if that is important for reliability of your voice channel in your use cases, know that that is now in preview out there. Also, in the contact center AI summary that goes on post conversation, and it doesn't really matter if it's voice or chat or SMS or Teams or whatever channel you're doing, that there's always a conversation that gets a post conversation summary. That if you do that and your survey results and all those kind of things, that there are some new updates to making sure that that works extremely smoothly and does a better job for people who are doing quality control scoring of all of that stuff using these summaries. If you use project operations, there are some really nice enhancements to the quoting module when you are trying to quote a project in the sales cycle. So if you have that use case, pay attention to this one. If you are back on the contact center route of things and routing rules have started to get a little bit out of control and you were tired of having to click into each rule in order to keep the updates going that make the routing happen the way you want, there is now the ability to select as many rules as you would like and in bulk update all those rules in one fell swoop if there's a similar condition that you're trying to update them all with. So nice to know that we are putting some bulk routing rule administration tools in place. And then back to the field service. I should have organized these a little bit better between those capabilities, but the ability to do inspections has been around for quite some time in the field service module, but now we are allowing that inspection builder to largely be AI driven and just tell it what kind of inspection you want, and it'll spit out a really nice inspection sort of plan, if you will, or a form for it, and allow you to really quickly then just modify it to instantiate what you need. And it can look at, a handwritten inspection form or a PDF of an inspection form or anything else that if you've got an existing version of something, you can just scan that and it'll build the inspection in the tool for you without you having to go, build it line by line, field by field, to make those things come to life. So bunch of great capabilities out there for project ops, for field service, and for the contact center space. I think that's all of the full Dynamics 365 capabilities I had. Dan,
Yeah,
time to finally turn it over to you.
It's been a month since,
Right.
it's been 2 fortnights, 4 weeks since we've done a show. So lots there. But I like to see that you're putting the focus back on the biz apps itself and the features on that. So that's it's really nice to see, Bart.
It's not just me putting that focus on there. That's the product team.
Isn't it just incredible? Anyways, it's like, again, I only have 6 line items, but of course there's a lot in there. So we'll get through most of it. I'll probably cut some of the stuff off and put it into the next show. But I'm going to cover some of the April releases for, what's new in Business Central, F&O, and Commerce here today. And it was like I've been neglectful with Business Central for the last 3 shows, quite frankly. So there's quite a bit to cover here. So if we look at first of all, there's integration with field service, right, and service management within Business Central. We've had that for a little while, for a couple, few years with finance and supply chain. We're finally doing that with Business Central now. It's going to take a premium license, first of all, so you had to know that instead of a basic license, and it integrates with projects or service, right? And you still have to map the fields, right, because there are 2 different systems, 2 different databases you need to map that out with. The second thing is view item availability within work order, service work orders, right? So just like they do in finance and supply chain, we have an inventory visibility service, a little bit different within Business Central. So there's a visibility service. We can actually see those items and those availabilities, not just lump sums of what's available within field service or within Business Central on that, and that uses virtual tables, very very much the same way that we do in finance and supply chain. The third thing is improve troubleshooting within costs. So basically, it's faster. It's gonna increase the speed and capabilities of that with fewer reruns and stuff like that. So that's what's going on there. there's a summarize with Copilot. So this is really kind of a nice feature. So what this does is summarizes components within a fact box, right? It's like so little box on the side, and it's like, okay, what do I need to know? What's going to surface up that I need to know based upon my role? So it's going to surface up some AI generated context for you to do your job better. Just to take a summary of what you need to know. So that's kind of a nice feature. Hopefully that'll make it and kind of spread across not only the sales stuff now in the Business Central, hopefully into the commerce and in finance and supply chain components. So there is some enhanced purchase order line matching. So this is actually for e-documents and e-invoice matching to actually do that matching back and forth. Just FYI, it's only in English right now. Like many things, it'll go to the rest of the languages after it's out of that preview stage. Also, there's some AI or Copilot generated autofill with Copilot. So it's like based upon the context, which you're trying to fill it out in the business unit, like if you're doing like a sales or customer, it's going to be in the context of a sales or customer of autofill, what you're kind of used to in all the office tools or search engines, but now it's actually within the document or within the ERP business application itself. So that's new on that. There's also a new sales order agent on this. So on the sales order agent, so it will anything from email or receive that email from customers. It's like in the shared company mailbox. It'll identify what that customer is. It's like if they're registered within Business Central, it'll if they're asking for a quote, it'll draft a quote for that. On the requested items, it'll verify the item availability, we just kind of talked about for field service, but this is for sales. And then it'll send that quote out to that customer. Now, if you've been listening to the show, we've been talking about this for several years since it's been in sales, but this is the first time it is native within Business Central itself. So that's a new feature. Also, if you want to read through, it's like for the localizations, lots of localizations for different countries and stuff. I'm not going to spend too much time on that. On the, let's see here, lots of development work. I'm not going to go into the detail of that. On e-commerce, there's a lot of Shopify integration. It's like we're improving our Shopify integration into this. Basically, it's like, to make sure I can understand what sales channels can go with different pricing with that, make sure that the import and export between Shopify goes with this is company specific on that. Some troubleshooting and some other components into that. For e-documents, so basically it's e-documents. It's like we're extending that. So we have an e-invoice service to work with different ISVs. So if you have different ISVs within that e-document, we have that integration into that. For financials, it's like there's some requirements that we fulfilled for intrastat classification of documents. It's like, so that's the European from country to country documents that go back and forth. So we'll make sure that we're compliant on that. And then we check the totals on the PO amounts. It's like, and that's for a Netherlands localization for that country specific for. On governance and on that, there is basically a link to Power Platform, reporting and analysis. So we enhanced the reporting on that. So it's like, okay, so there's one that converts it actually to a document to a PDF or vice versa, and we've also improved the layouts of that. So. And supply chain, there's a few things, especially for the April release. It's like, so first of all, actually there's quite a bit. So first of all, it's like for production rescheduling. So production rescheduling, remember, like Business Central does not have a finite scheduler, but we are scheduling with consideration to schedule within that safety lead time to actually lead that in for that. So it's like it's a little closer. We did some vendor and specific vendor customer specific documents for them, able to cancel a work order and make sure that we don't post anything to that work order. So there's been some improvements on that. We've increased the usability within the work orders, just as like easy to work with and change statuses. Also, overpicking on a production order. So it's like if you pick items, like sometimes it's like you just want to take a whole pallet out, even though you only need 3/4 of the pallet or a half a pallet, and we want to overpick that as we actually bring from the warehouse to that raw material out to the production floor, and then be able to consume what we need, and then just put the rest back instead of having to go through gyrations of, okay, this is picked to this. It's like, okay, now we have movement locations and things like that, and make adjustments. So we've done some standard costing updates within that. We've also added manual consumption without picking. So it's like you can actually consume materials without actually going out to the warehouse and doing the picking. So it's like line items and things like that. Added some subscription billing features within that. So unit cost of subscription billing there. Let's see, what else is important for this? We've blocked some items for replenishment, so it's not actually going to look for that. Another thing that's also important is to be able to reopen a closed work order, but sometimes like you might have some additional costs that you didn't consider on that, some rework on that, so you can actually reopen that and then post some additional costs into that. Edit some components into work orders. We made that a little easier. So say if you have substitutions, or if they did a wrong pick, or they did a line substitution that they didn't register at the or plan for at the time. So also easier to do barcodes within the production orders, so that we simplified that. And then attachments within the work order. So just made it simpler to do the attachments. Some sustainability within the system. We'll kind of cover that in a future. And then the user experience is like review PDF attachments is like directly on to that. I kind of mentioned about the PDFs earlier, but lots of things in Business Central. In commerce, there's a bit less. So if we go into commerce, so the first thing is, we deprecated our fraud and protection solution back a little while ago. I noticed that in a few shows ago. But now we're using the Adyen, or some people call Adyen risk management to minimize the e-commerce fraud. So it's like we're deprecating ours, we're using Adyen instead. We've done some things for synchronizing the payment processing. So if it's not real-time processing, so it's like a credit card, so it's like if it's some sort of other payment service, we've added additional functionality into that. In the e-commerce, we've done some, we have also done some attribute-based pricing. So, the new, we've always had very good pricing within commerce, but we've done some other advanced pricing service within finance and supply chain. So we've done that, and that includes attribute-based pricing. So we've added that to it. We've enhanced some store readiness. I've talked about it in the last show, and then the offline database size. I've talked about that in the last show. So, so that's it with commerce. And human resources. Not a ton, but there's a couple things that are worth noting. So first of all, we simplified the job posting, right? So for the recruiter, we made it a recruiter assist agent, which is a co-pilot, and that helps with the job description generation. And also there's an interview assistant with that to help generate questions to ask during an interview. There's also an integration with Viva Connections, which is basically a service to communicate everything that an employee needs to know, including the HR service now with that. So that's what's new in HR. In finance, there are a few things that I want to talk about. So first of all, we can manage assets using the acquired to disposed data model. And so that is the business performance analysis, right? So, so now we have that integrated with BPA to pull in all the information. So that includes usage, cost trends, dimension analysis from those different tools to actually make better decisions within your assets, whether they're profitable or not. Do we need to replace those, or so on and so forth? So also, we have added some cancel customer payment journal to the bank reconciliation worksheet. So it's like, so this is an AI, this is a co-pilot that actually for the reconciliations, like for the bank payments, to match those up from the bank records that you get, right? And so now what we can do is we can reverse posted journals directly from there. We can disable unmatched actions. So for generated related payments on that. And so what this does is gives you some more accurate statements on that. So we've also done some like better matching for bank reconciliation rules, right? So we can make up custom rules for that and make it a little more straightforward for everybody. And there's a few more things on bank rec, which I won't go into too much detail. There's updates on globalization, but you can read that on your own. So that's what's new in finance. A few things in supply chain. So not a ton, but some stuff worth noting. So first of all, in supply chain. So first of all, we have an automation co-pilot, right? For the supplier communications agent is really what it is. And so what this is going to do is it's going to automate the tasks that you have to do based upon the user defined rules. So for instance, if you get an email from one of your vendors, it comes in, it's like, okay, is this related to a certain PO? Okay, is this going to be late? Do we have to reschedule? Do we need to send a response back, so on and so forth? So it'll actually run automated tasks based upon your rules. Again, we're kind of seeing some of this co-pilot and this AI innovation come into to fruition on that. Some enhanced rebates. We've talked about rebates a couple shows ago, but basically you can resubmit and edit vendor rebates, right? So it makes it easier to reconcile. You can also consolidate multiple lines instead of having their own lines onto a single line as like of what the rebate amounts are going to be. There's some updates here within, let's see, let's go into planning. Actually, quality. I want to for the quality management. So first of all, we did an acquisition of some IP or intellectual property from one of our ISVs out in the field, and we've added other things that includes, like optimized testing. So we can do sampling, we can do skip lot sampling, we can do quality orders creations triggers on that. We can do sample management, and we can do calibration now, right? And we also have certificates analysis. We had those before, but it's more automated now. Electronic batch records are good. And then also, this is especially important for medical device, right? In pharmaceuticals or nutraceuticals, is in production dispensing. How much we're supposed to dispense, what did we do actually directly from there? And then CAPA, corrective action, preventative action. So for that, we've added some components into that. Now, on the procurement, actually, let's go into planning. We've added some components on planning. So first of all, in planning, it's like we considered assortment planning for the calculations. We've put time freezes on there for the for like forecasts. It's like make sure we freeze that out and for that forecast coming out. We have forecasts with singles, not only one signal for an external signal, for a signal, for instance, like temperature or humidity or something that's going to affect, or economic factors that might affect something in a forecast. And we also added some other algorithms and some AI into that for auto-detect seasonality. So that was kind of a flyby for that, but I have one last kind of important thing. And Bart, you kind of mentioned about the licensing, and there's been a big announcement in the licensing. So everybody's got to be aware of this. So this is really important. Okay, so first of all, on April 30th, admins will have access to the license usage report showing the seats available and the seats assigned, right? And this works both for the PPAC and LCS, right? So you'll be able to see who's assigned, who's not assigned, and where the licenses are going. So on August 30th, users will be required to have a user's license, and they'll get a notification if they don't have a license. It'll come up on the header and say, okay, contact your system administrator, you do not have a license. So that's kind of a shot over the bow. There's a warning on that, right? As of August 30th, they will be required to have a license. So if they don't have a license, they're not going to be able to use the system. So be aware of that. And then you're going to have to buy the licenses. Like I always tell my customers, make sure you write license. Don't under license somebody because you'll have to come back and do a true up and you'll have to pay for it later. That's not, something that you want to do, but also don't over license them. So you're not getting value out of the system. We want to make sure you maximize the value from what you pay for a system like that. So just FYI, be pre-warned because your users are going to start getting these messages very soon. And then as of August 30th, if they don't have the proper license, they're not going to have access. So just FYI on that. So Bart, this is one of the longest shows we've done in a very long time, isn't it?
Pace of change does not seem to be slowing down. Imagine
No,
that.
it doesn't. It doesn't. It's like, and having skipping a week or skipping a show didn't help at all. But anyways, it's like we, as always, look for the solution updates, right? And then places to find more detail. But with that, I think that's a wrap, Bart.
I think that will cover it. So we will see everyone in around a fortnight and update you with all the new news coming up for the next couple of
All right.
weeks.
Take care, everybody.